Am I the asshole for cutting off my jealous mom? When I was going through puberty, my mom started comparing my body to hers. She would say things like, you know what, it's okay that you're not developing as quickly as I did. Or that her boobs were already much bigger than mine were when I was 14. Here's a little backstory on my family. My mom has always been extremely dramatic and I think toxic. But I feel bad calling her toxic. On the other hand, I have a great relationship with my dad. And my two siblings are both guys, so they don't have the same experience I did with my mom. My dad always acted as a buffer between me and my mom, even though my mom was the one that was starting all the fights. When I got into high school, I realized how attractive I was. Honestly, I had no clue that I was even a pretty girl. Looking back now, I realized that my mom really did make me feel like I was less than. When I started getting attention from boys in high school, I was really happy. I finally felt like I was seen. And because my mom wasn't there, I was able to thrive. Whereas in my house, I would even dress down in front of my mom just so that she wouldn't get jealous of me. The first time I brought a boy over to our house, my mom totally flipped out. She said that I was acting like an SLUT, but really, this boy was only a friend. My dad, thank God, told her that she needed to relax and that I was allowed to have friends. Eventually, I started dating a boy behind my mom's back. I did tell my dad though. My dad was actually happy for me. This boyfriend was like my best friend. I could tell him everything and he always responded really positively and gave me really good advice about my mom. But one day, one of my brothers let it slip that I had a boyfriend. My mom punished me for an entire month. My dad tried to intervene, but my mom went crazy. Here's the thing. She made me break up with him and then I caught her flirting with him. Part 2 is When I caught her flirting with my now ex, who she made me break up with, I pretended like I didn't hear her. But she was flirting with him. She told him that he had really good muscles and that he looked a lot older than he was. Thank God, my ex didn't respond and went home. Afterwards, I confronted my mom and told her that I overheard the conversation. She told me that I was being a snob. I didn't talk to her for about 3 days. On the 3rd day, she came crying to my room. She wanted us to make up. So she decided to take me shopping at the mall. Being the toxic person that she is, she managed to make everything about her. Tried on a bunch of clothes, which actually did look really good on her. Oh, by the way, my mom was a model back in the 90s, so she's kind of stuck in that mindset. She thinks she's the most beautiful person. She thinks she's the best. Anyway, when it was my turn to try on some clothes, she said that I looked a little too tubby, that I should maybe lose a few pounds. I told her that she hurt my feelings and she instantly apologized. Our relationship kept going like this up until I was 18. When I finally moved away for college, I was the happiest I'd ever been. Being away from my mom was like a breath of fresh air. But of course, it never stopped. My mom decided to come visit me to college and I knew that I needed to be prepared for that. When she came over to my dorm, I made sure it was super clean. Also, my grades were super good and I basically had a few friends but no boyfriend. When she came over to my apartment, she was like, "Oh, it's so simple." I was like, "What do you mean?" She said that I needed to decorate and show my personality more. She stayed with me for a total of 3 days and the whole time I was grinding my teeth. When she finally left, I was happy again. Then my dad came to visit. Hanging out with my dad was the best. Took me shopping for my apartment and made me feel so at home. My mom got jealous. Part 3. Disclaimers did not my story time instead of me on Instagram. Then she somehow managed to get jealous that my dad and I were getting along super well. She called my dad while my dad was visiting me and threw a tantrum about how she needed him to go home. So my dad cut his trip short just to go be with my insecure mother. After that, I really didn't speak to my mom for about 2 months. I couldn't believe that she always managed to make me feel less than. And somehow she always made everything about her. I reached out to my brothers and asked them if they ever felt the same about my mom, and they said no. My mom was totally different with them. She took care of them and doted on them. Probably because they're boys and not me, because I'm a girl. One day I decided to call my grandmother and I told her everything. That's when my grandma told me that my mom has always been that way and that I just shouldn't take it personally. Apparently when my mom was growing up, she did not have any girlfriends. She always liked staying away from other women to not have any competition. But I told my grandma that she's my mom and that she shouldn't see me as competition. Grandma suspects that something is wrong with my mom, so, I don't know if she's bipolar or something, but obviously I can't diagnose her. Thankfully, I have other women in my life, my grandma and 2 of my aunts. They act like my mom's more than my own mother. When I graduated college, I was actually engaged. My fiance and I bought a house and we started planning our wedding. And of course, my mom wanted to help me plan it. I really didn't want this, but I decided to give her a chance. But once again, she managed to make everything about her. The entire time, she criticized my choices, even my wedding dress, which I absolutely loved, and it really did look good on me. She told me I needed to wear something more flattering. And then she ended up wearing my wedding dress in a different color. After the wedding, I decided to tell my dad and my brothers that I was going to cut my mom off. My dad begged me not to, but I still went ahead and did it. I called my mom and told her that I needed some time apart from her and that I did not want her calling me. Of course, she pretended like she had never done anything wrong in my life and that she's only been the perfect dedicated mother that she wishes she could be. Instead of arguing with her, I told her to just give me some space. She agreed to it and I haven't spoken to her in about 3 months. My dad and grandma keep begging me to talk to her. I don't think my mom is sad at all. She's always posting to her Instagram. She goes to Pilates, brunch with her friends, and travels with my dad. I think she's probably fine. But what should I do? Fiance faked being rich just to get me to marry him. Should I leave him? My fiance has lied to me literally over hundreds of times. It all started when he and I met 3 years ago. I was turning 32 and going through a divorce, so I had no intention of ever getting into another relationship, at least not for a long time. Come from a really wealthy family, so I inherited a lot of money when I turned 18. That never stopped me from getting a job. I started working in fashion and it was amazing. Eventually I became a stylist and had my own business. My relationship with my then husband was not going well, so we decided to get a divorce. But my ex-husband and I never really had hard feelings and we stayed friends. At the time I was living in New York and had tons of friends. Every single weekend I was going out. And since I was single, I literally had nobody to answer to. My friends and I would go to exclusive clubs and restaurants every single night. This is how I met my compulsive liar of a fiance. He was friends with somebody in my friend group. Now everyone in my group was pretty wealthy. We all drove expensive cars, owned our own businesses, and we worked really hard. One of my friends introduced me to him, and within the first 5 minutes of our conversation, he told me that he was a Calvin Klein model. Of course I believed it because he was really attractive. And he basically asked me how much money I made a year. And I was honest with him. I earned around 300 grand a year. That's when he told me that he was a millionaire. Follow for part. The very first night I met him, he told me that he was a millionaire and that he was a Calvin Klein model. Of course I believed him because he was just that attractive. Then he asked me how much I earned per year, and I told him the truth, $300,000. Look on his face was of utter shock. He told me he almost couldn't believe that I would make that much money. And he started talking about how he's a millionaire and he models and he travels around the world. I was actually impressed. Later that night, I asked the friend that introduced me to him if it was all true. She said, yeah, he posts about it on his Instagram, so I think so. Went to the bathroom and started looking him up on Instagram. And it looked like it was true. He did model for Calvin Klein and was modeling around the world. But honestly, from his Instagram, I really couldn't gather if he was a millionaire or not. It's not like he was posting pictures of him in a Maybach or anything. That very same night, he asked me if he could come to my apartment and I said no. The very next day, he asked me out on a date and I said yes. Ended up going to a really fancy restaurant and he paid for the bill. When the bill came, it was over $1,000. He ordered so many things off the menu. What I really didn't like was that he barely touched any of the food. The rest of the week, he invited me to all these different restaurants. On our second week, I asked him if he wanted to come to my place to have dinner, which he did. And the look of his face when he showed up to my apartment was like shocked. Finally, he asked me how much my rent was. That's when I told him I didn't pay rent. I owned the apartment. That's when he said, yeah, I own my own place too. And then I asked him, why haven't you invited me to your apartment? He said that he was getting renovations done. Exactly a month into us dating, he asked me to be his girlfriend and I said yes. Oh, I had not been to his apartment at this point. He had been paying for everything. Follow for part 3. At this point, he had been paying for everything. Every single time we went to dinner, any date we ever went on, he paid for everything. About 2 months into our relationship, I asked him again if I could go to his apartment. That's when he made up another excuse. He told me the contractor that was doing all the renovations in his apartment basically bailed on him. So his apartment was basically in shambles. I told him that I actually knew a contractor who could help him out. And he told me not to worry about it, that he had it covered. The very next week, he had prepared an elaborate proposal. He took me to Central Park where he had a band. He gave me a 3-carat pink diamond ring. Of course, I said yes. I was so happy. Never thought I'd find love again. After the engagement, I told him that we should just move in together. That's when he said, perfect. I can move into your place next week. I was like, what? He said that he actually wanted to sell his apartment. So I said yes. And the very next week, he moved into my place. When he showed up to my apartment, he literally only had 2 suitcases. And most of the clothes were kind of old and raggedy. I asked him where all of his stuff was, and he said, this is it. That's when I started getting really suspicious. I called his modeling agency, and they told me that they hadn't worked with him in 3 years. So apparently he wasn't really a model. Confronted him and asked him what was going on. He confessed that he hadn't modeled in years. That when he met me, he was so impressed that he needed to tell me something to impress me. He told me he had a lot of credit card debt and that he actually couldn't afford the lifestyle he was showing me. Then he also told me that he never even had an apartment. He was sleeping on his friend's couch. I told him I couldn't marry him or trust him, and that he was probably only after my money. He swears that he loves me. No, he hasn't asked me for money, and he's offering to actually pay for rent. My friends and family think I should leave him, but I love him and I'm so attracted to him. What should I do?